Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, guest. This evening we'll be listening to Izzy speak. He's 25th ID, Tropic Thunder. We talk about everything from being 11 Bravo all the way on to joining the Legion, the Brotherhood, doing defense fire missions, Zaporizhzhia, and for all you MK19 gunners who love that 40 mic action, please like this video, subscribe, and forward my content to people who you think would like this type of stuff.
As soon as I graduated high school, then I went into the infantry, where I was stationed in Hawaii with the 25th Infantry Division, where I went to jungle school and did a couple of other things. Well, I didn't actually go to jungle school, but we were jungle. It was a jungle unit, really good unit. I had a really good team. I was machine gunner for 3 years there on the MK19. I was a decent machine gunner. I was really good at, humping weight, and I was always proud to be a machine gunner. So that's kind of where my military comes from. Fifth generation Army on my mom's side. All of my founding fathers on my mom's side all fought in, every war before me. So that was a pretty big deal, pretty big motive for me to join the military. After the military, I'd gotten out due to a knee injury, which recovered quite well. I became a firefighter. So I did firefighting for 3 years. I was a firefighter EMT. I did that at a pretty high level for a while. I really enjoyed that work, but that was my most recent job before I left to Ukraine. So that's kind of like my work background.
Nice.
Just firefighter and machine gunner in the pretty good work. Yeah, that's me.
You're 11 Bravo infantryman, stationed with 25th ID out there in Hawaii, detached to a jungle unit out there. I didn't quite hear you well enough. Were you saying you were a 240 gunner or a 249 gunner?
I was a 240 gunner.
Nice. And did you deploy anywhere?
No, so that was a big thing for me, is I never got to deploy with my unit. It was 2017, so things weren't really too hot, in Afghanistan, which would have been the only place that we would have really deployed at the time, because we had one unit go, but my unit didn't get picked to go, so I never deployed.
So would you say that was like kind of a motivation to come to Ukraine?
It was a big motivation for me. Yeah, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as if everybody has, their own reasons why they showed up. And that's definitely one of my reasons, which is more of a personal reason, but it's one of my few reasons why I did go.
I understand.
You're saying you want more, because it's been a pretty back and forth battle since I've been home, with wanting to go back, getting back with my team, and or doing something. But that's something I also understand, and that's something I'm currently still going through, as we speak. But we're working with it.
How's the adjustment to civilian life?
Man, the adjustment's been weird. Like with the time right now, with with Trump and all these other things like that are being said in the media, it kind of makes things weird at home, because I came home and I can't talk to really no one about it, and the opinions at home are hard to hear. Like, I don't want to hear that stuff, And it's been a pretty tough adjustment, if I'm being honest with you. And then it also comes with, I've had some guilt, being away from war and being away from my guys. So if I'm being honest with you, it's been a pretty tough adjustment. But I'm doing my best. I'm trying to stay healthy, and I'm keeping my hands busy. So if I do that, I'll be okay.
Absolutely, man. I completely understand how you feel about that. And it's kind of difficult coming back to the United States in our case because it's one thing if we were out deployed with the US Army, but we were deployed in a different nation's military, and then we come back and there's not much that sense of like community, the brotherhood, the veterans, you know.
Yeah, there is none. So here recently, I've started to venture out into a new type of brotherhood, and I'm getting some support. So I can appreciate it. With the brotherhood, you have to go out and you got to find it. You got to find these guys. So it's okay. I can't complain, but I think the hardest thing is knowing that the war's still going on. But with what I have going on personally with my family and these things, like I just can't. I can't do any more time, and like it hurts, but I'm swallowing that pill.
Do you think you'll ever come back to Ukraine and give it another
Yeah,
go?
actually, yeah. So I'm definitely coming back to Ukraine. Currently, I'm in school for welding and underwater welding and like construction type stuff. So I'm wanting to actually come back. I'm not going to join the military again in Ukraine. But I do want to come back and actually help rebuild. The buildings, the bridges, and I hopefully I can get into some diving in Ukraine, like deep diving to help repair bridges, dams, these things of such. So it's a different way of helping, but it's still something. And I want to be able to provide something again at some point because I love Ukraine and I love the Ukrainian people very much.
Yeah, that's absolutely commendable. And can so if you could you then kind of give some of the listeners a brief description about like what Ukrainian society is like what Ukraine is actually like itself?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that was my favorite thing about being in Ukraine was getting to be a part of the culture. They have the warrior culture, which is something just amazing. And seeing, the men do what the men are doing, fighting for the country and the women too, fighting for Ukraine. Like just seeing that was just astonishing. But it wasn't even, the guys on the front. It was also the people in Kiev. Just how resilient people were. I was there when the missile hit the children's hospital. So I was a few miles down the road, and I showed up to help, do some search and rescue stuff. I know a little bit of that stuff from being a fireman, so I got to help and watching everyone come together and just it's like they've been doing this stuff, like they were recovering instantly. They had dump trucks coming in, they had linemen working on the power lines, they had people working on the railroad systems. They had so many people, that came together and took care of this, and it was so fast like watching it happen. So just seeing the resilience of the Ukrainian people is great, and the support that I had from the whole society itself. I was very well respected, and I never went hungry. I was very well fed. People need me. People wanted to bring me into their homes. People wanted to hear me talk, and just I felt as if I was, like people were thankful for me there. And I think a lot of guys feel the same way. And there's been multiple times in all of our lives where we haven't been appreciated, especially as men, and especially as men in the military. So being appreciated, like we have been appreciated in Ukraine, is just it's out of this world, and it is just a beautiful thing. And the language, Ukrainian language, is beautiful. The music, the music's amazing. Everybody, even the dancing history of Ukraine's beautiful. So it's just got such rich history, and I got to experience the history of hundreds of years of Ukrainians, and I appreciate it a lot. I really did. So just a beautiful society, and I wish that more people knew, how the Ukrainians are and how tough these people are, because people don't know these things. They just see what's on the media. So I will always speak so highly of of the Ukrainian people and what I experienced there, because it was nothing short of amazing.
Absolutely, super resilient people, super united people with such a rich culture, such a culture of like resistance and wars and just banding together and always coming out on top. Could you then tell us a little bit about your military experience in the Ukrainian armed forces? Like, what role did you have? Were you in the army?
So I served in the International Legion for I think I did 8 months total. Um, and I originally was on a reconnaissance team um, where I got recruited from this team. The commander had came and he had talked to me before I, did my selection process, and he knew I was a machine gunner from the United States, and he also, I'm a pretty decent sized guy, so he was, very excited to have me as his machine gunner. But I took his offer. I joined his team, and I was, the lead machine gunner on multiple big reconnaissance missions that we had. Um, we crossed the wire, quite a few times, and gathered some really good intelligence. Like I was really impressed with how great our reconnaissance team was, and so that was kind of like the first few months of what I was doing was recon. I was preparing for a huge, bigger assault, and we ended up conducting the assault, or a few teams in my squadron did, because my direct role at the time wasn't to do assaults; it was to, make the assault happen. So a lot of the work that I had done was just setting these things up, um, doing the recon. At one point, I got to build a bridge, which was great for BMPs and tanks. That was probably one of my prouder moments in Ukraine. But eventually, some things had happened to my squadron, some very unfortunate events on an assault that we had, and we lost some of our very important guys. And our squadron, honestly, it never recovered. Like it was never the same after we lost the guys that we lost. Honestly, probably some of the most important guys of the squadron. Um, so then I ended up taking a short break and then stayed with my team. My commander had been relieved of his duties, and then we had a new commander take over. And then we switched up what we were doing from into like more of defensive operations in Zaporizhzhia. So my defensive operations kind of consisted of, we did do some slight reconnaissance, but on the front there's just really not much need for reconnaissance. It's more of just like us doing fire missions, which was a big part of what I was doing on rotations was Mark 19 fire missions, because I do have some experience on the Mark 19 from the United States Army, and I was on that gun for a while, and we got to do some very effective fire missions. I also ran a 60 millimeter mortar. I was part of a mortar team with that. I mean, I know the 60 millimeter is not that crazy, but we got some really good work in with that. So the
Could you
majority of my work was, go ahead.
could you just like explain to us a little bit what a Mark 19 fire mission like entails?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would do our rotations, on our videos with footage and the radios, and eventually there would be movement. And what would happen is that we would be alerted, and we would go straight to the gun. So we had our FSO, the guy that would give us all our coordinates, and then we would lock in on those coordinates with the Mark 19, and we would, extend however many rounds our commander at the time wanted us to extend. So maybe it was 5 rounds uh, on certain coordinates, and then we would adjust. Um, until we were hitting what we needed to hit. So what we were doing was whenever they would move, anytime they would move in their trench or they were excellent or infilling, we were hitting them, keeping them in their place. And they weren't able to move for a long time because we just continued to hold that line. We continued our fire missions, and anytime they would move, that's pretty much what would happen is we would do a fire mission. And it was me and assistant gunner. So I was the gunner, assistant gunner, and then our lead, our like team lead. And we would probably have, up to 10 fire missions a day within 24 hours. So we were expending up to 200, 40 mic a day, which is a decent amount, especially with accuracy.
So
So
you would be like in
that
a
was,
adjacent trench, like in a Ukrainian position, and you would be firing these grenades over at the Russian trenches with like a drone walking you in or something.
yes. So I was in it was mainly the guys that I was in the trench with were Ukrainians. They were holding that line as well. But we would rotate 3 or 4 foreigners out of that position as well to run that Mark 19. So the majority of the guys in the trench were Ukrainian, and they didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Ukrainian. So things were kind of difficult at times, but they knew what we were doing, and we knew what they were doing. So, but yes, we would fire at their trench, and they were firing at us as well with multiple different things, artillery, mortars, drone drops. I remember the position that we were in. Within like one day, we had up to almost 40 drone drops. So it was a pretty busy position, but it had its days. Some days it was kind of quiet, and then some days it was very, very, very active.
Wow. Yeah, it just it's intense. That type of fighting's really intense out there. Do you have any close
Yeah,
calls personally? Did you murk anyone with any of those fire missions?
yeah, I did. That's where the confirmed kills that I do have come from. Are from the Mark 19 with drone footage attached to it. So that was kind of had our confirmation. Then also we had intercepted, the Russian radios, of course. The radios they were using were not that great. So it was very easy to translate everything they were saying. But yeah, I had some close calls in that position with drones specifically. There were multiple times that I got drone dropped while I was, outside of my bandage. But barely making it into my bandage. You're getting hit pretty hard with drones at the time. A couple close calls with some artillery, which was honestly like the sky just opened up hell, and just these huge rounds just landing at you. The whistle, that whistle that's coming in, and just hearing it, and then you don't hear it, and then it's just like right there on top of you. So there was a couple times that I almost got caught with artillery and drones, but other than that, honestly, I was very blessed with the positions that I was put in to where I just did not get hurt. I was super blessed to not get hurt. I mean, honestly, because I could have, I have all my limbs, my eyesight. I didn't drop one drop of blood, so I'm very thankful for that.
Right on, man. We're all, here grateful that you're able to go in there and do what you did and get back out in one piece. A lot of guys aren't that fortunate.
Absolutely. A lot of guys are not that fortunate, man. Yeah. So I can't thank God enough for allowing me to come home.
Did you have any experience with any like armor columns or like receiving fire from enemy tanks or anything like that?
No, I've heard enemy tanks. Like I've been close enough to hear them, but I never had gotten shot at by a tank. But hearing that noise definitely is like burned into my brain. Like that's hearing a Russian tank's definitely a scary thing, but I never had any close calls with tanks, fortunately enough. So I was blessed not to run into those problems.
What season was this in?
So, or I had started missions. I want to say it was November.
Okay, so you're like
Yeah,
go
it was. I
autumn into like
started.
winter.
Yeah, yeah. So through November into through January, through February, through March. I can't remember offhand what month I actually left, but it was sometime when it actually started getting a little bit warmer than it was. So I mean, on Christmas Day, I was in trench. So like all the way through December, I was really putting in work because I wasn't going home, and I just felt the need, around Christmas time to really put in some work. So
What was the
I remember that
conditions
day pretty
like
clearly.
in the trenches? Like, could you describe that?
Yeah, so honestly, from my experience, I guess it depends what trench you're in. Because I've been in some trenches that are waist high, and that's uncomfortable. There's absolutely no cover. But then I've been in some trenches that are 12, 14 feet deep in certain positions, like super deep trenches. Fortunately enough, I was in a pretty good trench. We were pretty dug in. If we weren't doing fire mission, we were digging. Digging and fortifying our position with logs. Um, the conditions were good because the Ukrainians had figured it out. Way before I ever came. So I was kind of put into the trench that was a decent trench. They had set it up to where we could survive from artillery and from drones. Assaults would have been a different story, especially if we were getting assaulted on. But the conditions of most of the trenches that I experienced were pretty decent. And I was actually able to eat pretty decent, out there in the trenches. A lot of potatoes, but I had food. So I never went hungry, especially on rotation. I always packed my own food, but the Ukrainians were bringing food in. They were bringing potatoes in and stuff, and they always shared. So it was some okay trenches. Like I can't complain. The conditions were great. Unless it was raining. The weather, the rain was pretty bad, and sometimes it would kind of sleet almost like a rain snow ordeal, and that really made it messy in the trenches, and it made it hard to walk around. Super cold. So when it was wet and cold, things were a different story. Like it was a lot harder to deal with. But when it was dry, I was fine. But dealing with that wet and that cold at the same time, because I've never experienced like cold. From where I'm from, it don't really get that cold. So it was kind of more of a rude awakening dealing with the cold this past year. So, but the conditions weren't as bad. But whenever I recon, we didn't even have trenches. We were working in actual forest at the time. The area that we did a lot of reconnaissance in was still pretty well vegetated. So those conditions were okay because I actually had trees to have cover in, to stay away from the drones. So going back to what I said about my conditions, it's like I've had some decent conditions that that I can work with. It made it easier to do my job because I was put in decent situations. Because I know experiences may vary. That's for sure. I know guys that have had, and you do too, and you've also had shitty conditions that have had the worst conditions. So, yeah, decent conditions.
How did the whenever you did a fire mission, like how did you feel? Did you get like a big adrenaline rush when you get that call?
Yeah, so we all had radios on it, and he would call to me, Izzy, fire mission, and that always got me pretty amped up. I mean, that was my job, so I was out there, and I wanted to work. I wanted to do my job, and I wanted to do more. So whenever we did get our chance, it was like everything I've done, with the military and with my service in Ukraine had paid off. every time I got to pull that trigger, it was just like, just the best feeling because I've worked so hard and I've trained so long and I never actually got to be a soldier. So that made me feel like I was proud. I was proud, especially when we got our first confirmed. It was a good feeling, and that's hard to explain to just your average Joe, but it's like I'm doing it. So it always felt good. It always felt good.
So, what do you think about what's going on right now with all that political talk of this 30-day ceasefire and everything going on between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin?
Oof. Yeah, it's tough right now. It's tough. I know a ceasefire with Russia is you can't trust their word for shit. Like you can't trust anything they say. It's it right now. I really got to believe it to see it. Um, I really wish we could figure something out, and I don't know why. You know, I mean, I guess I do know why, but I just I hope for them to figure it out. Yeah, I do. But I don't really have too much to say on that, other than I pray that we can figure something out because it's just been dragged out, and then we've got thousands of guys dying, all the time, and that's just ridiculous. It's honestly got me like dumbfounded that it's continued on this long. So just praying for an end, brother. Just praying for an end. That's
Wish
that's
for
all I can
peace.
really do right now.
Yeah.
Wish for peace, man. But and we got to support Ukraine. Uh, with peace, you must have strength. So the only way Ukraine can create peace is through strength. And everyone's got to come together right now to make this happen. And I wish we were doing more as a country, the United States, but obviously we know how that's going. But yeah, I hope for peace.
Amen. You think that the Ukrainians can hold off the Russians, like, inevitably?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I do. Yeah, I do. I do believe that, but I understand how high of a cost it is. Um, and I would never want that to be inevitable. That's for sure. But it's like I know they can because I've seen it and I've watched it. I've been a part of it, and the strength is just it's outrageous. How strong these people are. So I do believe that to be true. But Ukraine has to have support in order for that to happen because they need artillery, they need vehicles, they need tanks, they need all of these things from the allies. So I do believe they can, but they also need the support to continue. So I'm always thankful to package going to Ukraine. Artillery shells are going to Ukraine. Like that's what it takes. The men are there to give them what they need. Because they've been very successful so far. So why not keep letting them do exactly what they're doing?
Roger that. And so I always let everyone finish off with just kind of like a final message, something they want to get off their chest or make everyone aware of who listens to this channel. So now is your time to pretty much say your piece.
Yeah. So I guess I'm speaking to all the guys that have done something for Ukraine, in the defense of their land. Um, put up, and you did your part. You did enough, and that's been a hard thing for me to accept. And I hope that all of our brothers and and sisters too that have done their part can accept that they've done enough. Um, I've struggled with regret, but I'm getting through it. So I really hope that we can keep doing what we're doing, and I hope that all the guys, especially the foreigners that come there and show up, you've done enough. You've done enough. And even if you're doing more, you've still done enough. But that's what I've struggled with, and that's what I've needed to get off my chest.
Well,
It's kind of hard for me to articulate what I want to say because I haven't talked about this topic too much to anyone. So it's been nice to get things off my chest, brother, and I definitely appreciate the time to allow me to speak my voice.
Well, now is the time, and my friend, like I'll say it right now, you've done enough. You should be proud about what you've done already. And like I say all the time, I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for your time coming on here and speaking and getting the message out to everyone out there. Because nowadays with the news, you can't really always trust the mainstream media, what people are saying out there. But I always want to give the voice to the men and women who are actually there on the front lines, actually doing this stuff. And you're the last thing you just said about doing enough and being content with it. That really does hit home with a lot of us out there, a lot of veterans. And you certainly have done your part, and really proud of what you've done. You kept Ukraine much more safer in better hands than it has been before. So I want to thank you, sir, again for coming on and speaking to us.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for this opportunity.